Think modern meal prep is tough? Try feeding yourself when your nearest grocery store is a 3-week raid across the North Sea. Viking warriors didn't survive on protein bars and energy drinks. They built their legendary reputation through a combination of superior shipbuilding, strategic warfare, innovative trade networks, and yes, the practical wisdom to fuel their bodies with whatever they could grow, catch, or cleverly preserve through brutal Scandinavian winters. These 7 warrior-approved meals weren't Instagram-worthy, but they supported the strength and endurance that made Vikings formidable across medieval Europe. From simple porridges that simmered for days to ingenious preservation methods that kept armies fed during months-long campaigns, here's how the Norse turned basic ingredients into reliable sustenance for their ambitious expeditions. First up is gruel, a hearty porridge that modern fitness enthusiasts would recognize as the ancestor of overnight oats, but built for warriors who needed fuel for wielding battle axes rather than lifting weights at the gym. Viking gruel started with whatever grain survived the harsh Nordic climate, usually barley or oats. Unlike the watery medieval version that barely qualified as food, Norse gruel was thick enough to stick to your ribs during a day of serious physical labor. The secret? They cooked it longer and added fat whenever possible. The basic recipe couldn't be simpler. Boil grain in water until it reaches a substantial consistency, then add whatever protein source you could find. Fortunate warriors might throw in some fish oil, chunks of preserved meat, or even blood from recent hunts. The result looked humble but delivered the steady energy needed for Viking expeditions. Archaeological evidence from longhouses shows that many Viking families kept their cooking pots in continuous use, adding fresh ingredients as older portions were consumed. One dig site in Norway revealed cooking vessels with residue patterns suggesting long-term, varied use over many years, though we can't be certain exactly what was cooked or for how long in any specific pot. During sea voyages, gruel became even more crucial. Ship cooks could prepare it using seawater when freshwater ran low, and the thick consistency meant it stayed put during rough seas. Maritime records describe Viking crews eating gruel twice daily during long expeditions, once at dawn before rowing began, and again at dusk when they made camp. The beauty of Viking gruel was its adaptability. Running low on grain? Throw in some ground nuts or dried berries. Need more protein? Add crushed dried fish or blood pudding. Feeling celebratory after a successful raid? Honey and butter transformed basic gruel into a warrior's feast. Vikings perfected the art of creating biscuits called hardtacks that lasted longer than most marriages and were nearly as hard as their battle shields. These hardtacks could survive months at sea and still be edible, assuming your teeth survived the encounter. Making hardtacks required just 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and determination. The dough was rolled thin, cut into squares, and baked until it achieved impressive hardness. Properly made hardtacks could last for extended periods without spoiling, though claims of 800-year-old edible pieces likely reflect later historical periods rather than Viking Age examples. The key to the hardtack's longevity was removing moisture through thorough baking. Viking bakers would often bake their hardtacks twice, then store it in barrels or sacks, the best storage methods available to them at the time. While not the airtight preservation systems of later eras, these methods still provided reasonable protection against humidity and pests. Eating hardtacks required strategy. Smart Vikings soaked it in ale, broth, or even seawater to soften it before attempting to chew. The alternative was risking broken teeth, a serious problem when dental care was centuries away. Some creative warriors discovered that hardtacks made excellent fishing weights when tied to lines and could be eaten later if the fishing was unsuccessful. During long sea voyages, hardtacks became the foundation of most meals. Ship cooks would crumble it into stews, grind it up for thickening broths, or pound it into meal for making other dishes. One Viking saga mentions warriors using hardtacks as currency during a particularly long campaign. Apparently, food that wouldn't spoil was more valuable than silver when supplies ran low. The psychological impact of reliable hardtacks shouldn't be underestimated. Having food that lasted extended periods gave Viking warriors confidence to undertake longer expeditions. While other armies worried about supply lines, Vikings could load their ships with hardtacks and know they had dependable nutrition for months. The cold North Atlantic served as the Vikings' natural refrigerator, and they became masters at turning its bounty into long-lasting protein. Dried fish, particularly cod and herring, formed the backbone of Viking nutrition, providing sustainable protein that could outlast even the longest winter. The drying process was elegantly simple but required perfect timing. Fresh fish were cleaned, split open, and hung on wooden racks during the coldest, windiest days of late winter. The combination of freezing temperatures, low humidity, and constant air circulation slowly removed moisture while preserving the protein. Properly dried cod became impressively hard, but soaking in water for several hours transformed it back into edible fish. This rehydrated fish retained most of its original nutritional value, providing complete protein with all essential amino acids needed for muscle maintenance and recovery. The scale of Viking fish drying was impressive. Coastal settlements dedicated entire hillsides to drying racks, processing thousands of pounds of fish annually. Trading records suggest that dried fish became one of Scandinavia's earliest export commodities, with Viking merchants carrying it as far as Constantinople. During raids and expeditions, dried fish provided reliable nutrition that resisted spoilage. A single dried cod could provide multiple meals when rehydrated and added to stews or eaten with hardtack. The portability was crucial. A warrior could carry weeks of protein in a small sack. Archaeological evidence from Viking Age sites shows sophisticated fish processing operations. One excavated settlement in Iceland revealed drying facilities capable of processing over 10,000 fish annually, enough to feed several hundred people through the winter months. Vikings practiced nose-to-tail eating centuries before it became a culinary trend. When animals were slaughtered, every part was used, including the blood, which became blood pudding, a protein-dense survival food that could sustain warriors through harsh conditions. The basic recipe was surprisingly sophisticated. Fresh animal blood was mixed with grain, usually barley or oats, chopped fat, and whatever seasonings were available. This mixture was then stuffed into cleaned intestines and boiled until firm. The result was a sausage-like food packed with iron, protein, and calories. Blood pudding solved several practical problems for Viking communities. First, it prevented waste of valuable nutrition. Animal blood contained significant protein and iron that would otherwise be lost. Second, it preserved this nutrition in a form that could last for weeks when properly smoked or dried. During hunting season or after successful raids that included livestock, Viking families would often spend entire days making blood pudding. Archaeological sites have revealed specialized tools for blood pudding production, including funnels for stuffing intestines and smoking racks designed specifically for preservation. The nutritional benefits were substantial. A single serving of blood pudding could provide as much iron as a Viking warrior might otherwise get in a week, helping prevent the anemia that could weaken fighters during long campaigns. The high fat content also provided concentrated calories crucial for maintaining body heat in Scandinavian winters. For sea voyages, blood pudding became especially valuable. Unlike fresh meat, which spoils quickly, properly prepared blood pudding could last for months in the salty sea air. Viking ships often carried dried blood pudding as emergency rations, knowing it could keep crews alive when other food sources failed. When Vikings needed to prove their resourcefulness, they ate hakarl, fermented shark meat that could survive Arctic conditions and remain edible when other foods failed. This traditional preparation was about turning potentially toxic ingredients into life-sustaining nutrition. Fresh Greenland shark meat contains high levels of trimethylamine oxide, which breaks down into substances that can cause symptoms similar to alcohol poisoning. But Vikings discovered that burying the shark meat allowed natural fermentation to neutralize these toxins, creating an edible, if pungent, protein source. The fermentation process was remarkably sophisticated for its time. Shark meat was buried in gravel pits during the coldest months, allowing the meat to slowly ferment without rotting. After approximately 6 to 12 weeks underground, the meat was dug up and hung to dry for 4 to 5 additional months before consumption. The result was a protein source that could last indefinitely and provided nutrition when all other foods were unavailable. Fermented shark was so calorie-dense that small portions could sustain a person for days, making it ideal for emergency rations during failed hunts or devastating storms. Modern analysis shows that hawk oil contains significant amounts of protein, omega-3 fatty acids, and various minerals. The fermentation process also created beneficial compounds that may have helped Vikings maintain health during periods of limited dietary variety. The psychological aspect was equally important. Warriors who could stomach fermented shark were considered tough enough to handle any hardship. This reputation likely contributed to the fearsome image that preceded Viking raiders across Europe. In the Arctic regions where some Vikings settled, seal fat became precious fuel, providing concentrated calories essential for surviving in environments where even basic activities required significant energy expenditure. A single spoonful of seal oil could provide more calories than most people consume in an entire modern meal. Hunting seals required considerable skill and courage, but the nutritional payoff was enormous. A single seal could provide enough fat to sustain a family through the darkest winter months. The fat was carefully rendered and stored in containers made from seal stomachs or carved wooden vessels. Seal fat wasn't just eaten straight, though Vikings certainly did that when calories were desperately needed. More commonly, it was used to enhance other foods, turning bland gruel into calorie-dense fuel or preserving other meats by coating them in protective fat layers. The fat served multiple purposes beyond nutrition. It could be burned for light and heat, waterproof clothing and equipment, and even used medicinally for treating wounds and skin conditions. This versatility made seal hunting one of the most valuable activities for northern Viking settlements. During sea voyages to the far north, seal fat became essential for survival. The concentrated calories helped maintain body temperature in sub-zero conditions, while the fat's preservation properties meant it never spoiled, regardless of weather conditions. Archaeological evidence from Greenland Viking settlements shows sophisticated seal, fat processing, and storage systems. One site revealed containers holding what appeared to be several hundred pounds of preserved seal fat, enough to sustain a community through multiple harsh winters. The final meal on our list was the ultimate Viking improvisation: mixed grain porridge that combined whatever grains, seeds, and other ingredients were available into a single nutritious bowl. This flexible approach maximized nutrition while minimizing waste. The base typically included barley, oats, and rye, but could incorporate any available grains. Seeds from wild plants, ground nuts, and even flowers were added when available. The goal was creating complete nutrition from diverse plant sources. Cooking methods varied based on available fuel and time. Sometimes the porridge was cooked quickly over high heat, other times it simmered slowly throughout the day. The consistency could range from thick paste to thin soup, depending on liquid availability. Protein additions transformed basic porridge into complete meals. Bits of preserved meat, fish, cheese, or eggs turned grain porridge into sustaining fuel capable of supporting intense physical activity. Blood from butchered animals was sometimes added for iron content. The beauty of this approach was its adaptability. No two batches were exactly alike, but all provided the complex carbohydrates, protein, and fats needed for Viking survival. This flexibility allowed communities to maintain nutrition even when specific ingredients were unavailable. During campaigns, mixed grain porridge became standard warrior fare. It could be prepared quickly, provided sustained energy, and used whatever ingredients were available through foraging or trading. This practical approach to nutrition helped support the Viking expansion across Europe and beyond. These 7 meals represent more than just survival food. They demonstrate the practical wisdom that allowed Vikings to thrive in harsh environments while building one of history's most successful seafaring cultures. Their expansion across Europe and beyond resulted from a complex combination of superior naval technology, strategic warfare tactics, extensive trade networks, and, yes, the ability to maintain proper nutrition during long expeditions. From simple gruel to complex fermented foods, each meal was designed to maximize nutrition, minimize waste, and provide the energy needed for their ambitious voyages. The next time you complain about meal prep, remember that Vikings were optimizing their nutrition for survival and exploration using nothing but natural ingredients and centuries of practical wisdom.